Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. The board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss contract negotiations, collective bargaining, and we are here now. So we have already said our pledge. And do we still do roll call?
No, you roll call.
We did it there. We don't have to do it here. Okay. So the next Board of Education meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, February 15th at 7 p.m. in the auditorium. And our workshop topic will be a special education update. And I want to make sure that I announce, and I will make this announcement every meeting between now and sometime in April, that Board of Education trustee candidate petitions are available. Petitions and first campaign expenditure statements are due no later than 5 o'clock on Monday, April 18th in the district office. To receive a petition, you can contact Catherine Platt. You can either stop into the district office or email her directly at cplatt@haldaneschool.org, and she can answer any questions. There are 2 seats up for election this year, both my seat and Sean McNall's seat. And I will speak on behalf of my colleagues when I say that we are very happy to talk to anybody who's interested in running for board and learning more about what we do. You can reach out to any of us directly, and we'd be happy to sit down with you. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Dr. Benante for his comments.
Thank you, Jen, and welcome to the members of the community who are with us this evening and those who may be watching at home. Just a few business-related updates for the board before we transition to some presentations. The first, I sent a notice home to parents today regarding our snow day usage. We've currently used 2 emergency weather days. We have 3 built into the school calendar, and there's some weather coming this weekend, so I hear. I've been advised that weather's on the way. Just a note that we obviously will utilize 1 more snow day if we have a need to, but if there's a need for a 4th emergency day of some sort, we will look to use that as a remote learning day. And we discussed this last year, you may recall, where the state has provided us with that option to use a remote learning day and to count it as a day of instruction. And that's a good tool for us to have because it allows us to maintain the integrity of our calendar for the remainder of the school year. So we don't have to look to other makeup days, hopefully, that would alter spring break or alter extended holiday weekends where we know families may have plans in advance for travel and such. So our hope is we never get to a 4th day. But it's still relative. We're in the middle of winter and we've already used 2, so I have a feeling we may need to access that remote learning day if and when we get to that 4th day between now and whenever winter ends. So I know Groundhog's Day was it today or tomorrow? It's tomorrow. So we'll see what the groundhog has to say. Also included in that notice was that we are going to send COVID tests home. These are at-home tests for our students to utilize. We have been receiving a steady shipment of COVID tests over the past 2 weeks, and while we were reserving these and had initially set up a system that families could access them as needed, simply call the school and let us know. We now have so many, which I guess is a good problem to have, that we need to just send them home with students at this point. We envision continuing to receive these shipments for the foreseeable future, so we'll continue to send them home on a weekly basis that's in alignment with the schedule in which we receive them. The building principals will be managing that, so it may look a little different at the elementary, middle, and high school in terms of the specific days they go home, but they'll be going home in close proximity to one another. Again, good news, especially as COVID rates still continue to be high. We're encouraged that rates are dipping, but still we're seeing a community-wide infection rate of around 10%, which is pretty significant. So we're not out of the woods yet. And we hope that our students or their families in particular make good use of the at-home tests if needed. We had a good meeting of the district-wide safety team today. I just want to thank Deputy Tolvey, who's an active participant on that team, as well as our community partners, our administrative staff, and Alteris. It's good to continue to stick with the process. That was an investment in Alteris' services that the board made years ago, and I think it continues to serve us really well, even in these times where it may seem like we are emphasizing more public health and safety more more so than others, we really have a responsibility and have maintained our responsibility to balance our internal safety measures just as much as we have our public health safety measures on campus, and I'm really pleased with that. It would have been easy to let this kind of fall by the wayside, and we haven't, and we continue to focus on improving our internal processes. And lastly, I just wanted to mention to the board that our campus master planning process continues. The request for proposal, the RFP, is now posted. We will be having a walkthrough for interested applicants next week. Me and Mr. Walsh with those applicants. I believe the posting closes at the end of this month or early March. And next week, we will be sending the invitation out to our community, which also includes a notice in the Highlands Current and the PCNR regarding the creation of the ad hoc master planning committee and an invitation to apply to be a part of that process. So that information will go home or go out next week, and we encourage interested community members to check it out once it is posted, and we look forward to their response, and we also look forward to meeting with interested architects or vendors who may be responding to the RFP in the weeks ahead. Those were just my business updates. I'll pause there if there's any questions.
I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we'll transition just to an overview of some updates regarding our business office structure and a proposal that I have. So while we're very sad to see our colleagues and our friends move on to in retirement, it's a good thing, celebrate, and we want to be cognizant of celebrating Ms. Dinio's contributions to the district, and also Ms. DeMarais, Jesse, in our district office, who will be retiring at the end of this school year. Anytime you have a key retirement, key retirements like those, it's a good opportunity to re-examine your structure just to see that if the current roles and responsibilities are aligned with position titles in the best way that they can, or in a way that makes sense, makes the best sense or most sense for the district and its current needs. So with Ann's retirement and Jesse's retirement, also with the addition of Mr. Elder in the Director of Curriculum and Human Resources position, this was a good time for us to step back and make sure that our current structure on the business and HR side of things really fits with what our needs are as a district. So this overview is our current state. This is our current organizational structure on the business side of things, as well as the human resource side of things. I've included my office here, as well as the Board of Education. And in examining this and working with Ann and some of my staff at the district office, we feel that there's a few shifts that could be made that would better serve the needs of the district, not only in the short term, but potentially in the long term as well. So with that, Catherine, if you wouldn't mind transitioning to the next slide. So this overview, you'll see 2 to 3 key changes. I'll speak to one that's, I think, just a little more straightforward. Underneath the Director of Curriculum and HR, you'll see that I'm proposing the reclassification of what is now currently an office assistant position to a personnel specialist position. And I feel that we are in need of, again, continuing to grow our human resources department. Those needs continue to increase for the district. We also feel that we have some areas that are in need of attention to remediate or to correct. As Mr. Elder has had a chance to embed himself here, examine our current practices against existing laws and regulations. We also had a very informative human resources audit that was completed this fall and into the early part of this winter. So we see that we have quite the agenda on things to address, and we feel that a personnel specialist will provide an additional layer of support that not only serves as clerical support to Josh or to the Director of Curriculum and HR, but also can provide further support in the background on human resource related functions. So we see that as a win-win. So that would be a reclassification of a position there. For now, for purposes of this, this chart, I've also aligned the board clerk responsibilities with that position because I believe there's room there to do so. I've also pulled the clerk pro tem responsibilities up to the confidential secretary to the superintendent. You may recall that Ann serves as our clerk pro tem when needed, when our district clerk's unavailable. So we would align those coverage responsibilities, if you will, to the confidential secretary to the superintendent's position. So those were the changes that were a little bit more straightforward. The side that is a little bit more nuanced, and I say probably has an impact on us not only now, but potentially on our future, is the creation of an accountant position, which would be new. And something I don't think folks realize is that Ann, in her 15 years of service to Haldane, really has served two roles. She served as our school business official, but she also serves as our accountant. So we've gotten a great deal. Ann doing the duty of two people for the price of one, I will say. But this is a good opportunity to now correct that and to ensure that we have good accountant support in place, while still maintaining a level of business manager leadership, because I think that's important as well. That being said, with a full-time accountant in place in this model, I don't think initially we will require full-time school business manager support. We will require leadership in that area. So my recommendation in the short term is to hire, as Ann transitions out, an interim school business official with the potential of hiring an accountant. We would not need that individual to serve full-time for the district. We would need someone to come in periodically, a couple days a week, to continue to provide leadership over the department, ideally supporting an accountant in their transition or continued transition into the district. And it also gives us an opportunity or time to examine that position and whether there's other ways to approach providing continued leadership on the business side in the district, perhaps through a more collaborative effort with another district or through some other mechanism. So from a cost perspective, this is cost neutral. All the money we're putting into these positions now that was articulated in the previous structure would essentially pay for this structure as well. We can afford this within the current budget. The difference is it's undoubtedly a shift for us as it relates to the business manager position. Obviously, we've grown quite accustomed to Ann's leadership in this role, and that's a big transition for us. But moving towards more of a part-time leadership model is a shift, undoubtedly. But I think it's one that the timing's right to do it. Because there's an appropriate add on the level of support that would come along with an accountant, and it gives us time to talk through, again, how we would want to approach leadership in this area in the long term, knowing we can get a good level of support in the short term in place through an interim. So I'll pause there just to see if there's any questions about the roles and responsibilities, how this lines up, and talk through any questions that the board has.
I'll just share that, I don't pretend to know exactly what y'all need in the district office to make it run smoothly. But I certainly trust Dr. Benante and Ann and all of the other team members to be able to tell us what they need. And what I do know is if this doesn't work, the whole school doesn't work. So as this isn't like that exciting or, dynamic to talk about the restructuring of a office, but what I've learned is that it's incredibly important. So if this doesn't work like a well-oiled machine, the whole school won't work.
Right.
And I understand the timing of it. I think, it's one of those things you have to kind of wait for the right time. Mm-hmm. And with the retirements, it seems like the right time to relook and reorganize. So I certainly appreciate the time that I'm sure Ann and Phil have spent digging deep here to see what would work best, and how to do it in a way that doesn't cost the district more money is incredibly important. So,
Thanks, Jen.
And this would be two hires?
So technically two hires because two people are leaving. Would be the hiring of a new accountant, the hiring of a personnel specialist. Now, how we move forward with the business manager position, that would be a third individual. Again, I'm advocating for it to be an interim, would not be a full-time position because I believe that there isn't a need for full-time support in that area. Ann has assured me that this year's budget is going to continue to go smoothly, and she'll leave us in good hands there, which is reaffirming, I guess, or assuring.
I have a couple of questions. I guess, bad on me for not realizing, maybe I sort of thought this, but I didn't realize, didn't expect that the Director of Facilities reported in Ann. And I guess sort of mine, but I didn't realize that. So that's obviously a big chunk of, that's a lot of stuff there. And my question, I guess, comes at, although I have the utmost confidence in Tim's management of that department, and I don't I don't think he would need ongoing engagement from management in a way that potentially other new boxes on this chart might. Like, I'm interested in how the accountant tax collector comes up to speed on the nuances of our cafeteria, for one. And I'm also interested in, how do you think about the tech integration versus infrastructure management sort of division or reallocation? Like, could you talk to that a little bit?
And I just want to mention with respect to the Director of Facilities
Yeah.
that while Ann plays a more direct role in oversight of the director, if there's ever a need to, especially when we get into this transition, certainly that's where I can step in
Yeah.
if there's a
Yeah.
void there. So I feel that Tim will have, continue to have an appropriate level of support
Yeah.
and guidance as needed, although, as you noted, he does a great job overseeing the department, and I know will continue to. On the tech, infrastructure management and tech integration end, so we really want our tech integration specialist, which we currently have a TOSA in place, to focus on technology integration. Leah plays a broader role, and also on the, her role crosses over with infrastructure management.
Right.
It's hard to completely separate these things, but if we're really thinking in our ideal state, how are these operating? The infrastructure management piece is being overseen on the business end of the operation, and the tech integration component is being overseen by Josh, by the Director of Curriculum.
Yep.
And it lines up that way. Obviously, these two entities are working closely together. There should be a through line there. There isn't, I noticed, but Leah does play such a big role in that regard. You have heard me speak before, and I'm wary of things that are not budget neutral, that would be budget adds, and that, or would be perceived as additions to administration, because I realize that we should be wary of that. I think we run a lean operation, and that's the expectation of the community, and I'm very appreciative of the support that the board has provided for the addition of the HR and curriculum position. I think you've seen the benefits of that. Having a director of technology or having technology leadership role defined, I think would be a good thing. That's providing direct oversight of the infrastructure management and also the tech integration specialist. I think that might be, that's too much for now, quite frankly. But in the long term, I do think that we should have broad technology oversight. Now, if perfect world, given what I've shared about the business manager position and the interim leadership, that might be an area, as we think long term, that we could expand the area of oversight to also include technology leadership. I don't know if such a person exists that could provide business office leadership and also provide technology leadership. But when I share, long-term, I think this sets us up well. It gives us a chance to explore what's out there. That would be a position now that you have that, well, there's a little bit of room. It wouldn't be budget neutral, but it would perhaps, it gives us the time to really examine, is that an area where we could expand an individual's leadership to also include technology leadership, and then we would bring the infrastructure and the infrastructure end underneath that. So that's just something that one option I think we have kind of in mind as we're planning. But the positions are related. These are two groups that have to work together, two people who have to work together. Obviously, EduTech's a group, so on a pretty continual basis.
Okay. Cool, that makes sense. One more question. I know that Ann is obviously, as you mentioned, super critical to budget, and that starts August. So, in your ideal world, is there do you get to a full-time business manager treasurer by beginning of next school year, or in the absence of that, who would be serving that function of everything that Ann does
Sure,
on the
I
budget?
think if we have a good accountant in place,
Yeah,
we can get by for the year with an
Okay.
interim.
Okay.
That is working with us, as long as they're competent, which I would expect them to be.
Sure.
That is working on an interim basis. And there's ebbs and flows to the year, as you're familiar with. Some years demand more of a business official as compared to others. Now being one where we would need someone to be with us for a significant amount of time, but we may not need that once our audit's completed in the fall. So that being considered, we could go through a full school year with an interim working, if we have a good accountant with an interim working with us on a part-time basis.
and that person would be the lead on budget generation and
Yes.
reporting? Okay. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep.
Looking ahead to our budget presentation for curriculum instruction. So actually, Ann and I are going to take the podium just so we can see the screen a little more readily. Catherine, thanks for getting us out of this one and into the next one. So we have a few items to go through this evening with our board. The first, just some background information that's forming the basis of our planning under the areas of curriculum and instruction, or areas of consideration, I would say, going into the upcoming school year. We have some information we'd like to share with the board that isn't necessarily related directly to curriculum and instruction, but the governor's executive budget proposal has come out. We'd like to apprise the board of a few key items included in that proposal, which may or may not impact our budgeting going into next school year. That includes the executive budget run. We have calculated an anticipated tax levy limit for the district, which is an important reference point for us, as you know, as we go into budget development. And then we want to come back to or circle back to the program component expenditure trends, which we include as part of the curriculum and instruction budget development each year. So as we look at curriculum development, as you're aware that several of our strategic coherence long-term goals tie directly to what we want students to know and to be able to do. And the process or the time that we commit to really effectuating those things centers around curriculum development. So bringing our teachers together in some way, shape, or form, giving them the opportunity and the space to talk about the Haldane essentials, what it means for their particular content area, and what are the threads that tie together our respective content areas, K-12 in our system. And through that process, we sometimes recognize where there's gaps or where there's opportunities to further enhance our children's program experience or classroom experiences to effectuate the critical skills and dispositions that we're trying to reach for them. So this has direct implications on the money that we set aside for curriculum design and development. It's not a lot, as you'll see, in our current budget. So I'm not making a proposal tonight on what to increase that to, other than trying to just raise your level of awareness of that. And as I finalize the administration's recommendation for budget for the upcoming school year, you will likely see an increase to that line because that's an important part of our work if we're keeping our coherence planning goals in mind. I mentioned at the front of budget development back in December when we begin our planning, we're also considering areas of our program that may need to be further developed. This includes our literacy, enhancing our literacy practices at the elementary level, which is always an area of focus. I say an investment in literacy at the elementary is, in the long term, an investment in the success of our high school. So that's an important area to focus on. Our intervention model, you've heard both Tara, Christine, I think even Mary Ann had alluded to it in her last building report about our multi-tiered system of student supports. we'll shorten that down just to our intervention model. K-12, there's an opportunity, there may be opportunities to further enhance certain interventions that we have available to students at those levels or program-wide. And then also special education. Special education is a topic that we've come into and out of over the years. We've heard from community members regarding our current special education structure and a desire to make further enhancements to our programs in that area. So that is also something that while Tara will be presenting separately on special education or special services falls under this component of the budget. So you'll see a budget line for this as we get further along in the presentation. And this, as I finalize my recommendation for the board, that's something that I'm being mindful of in budget development and we're working on behind the scenes. So a lot comes together in the program end over the course of the next month. The administration makes a final budget recommendation to the board or initial budget recommendation to the board in its entirety in March 1st. So we have 28 days to continue to refine this. So just a heads up on what areas we're focusing on. In years past, I've provided the board with an overview of our class sizes. So there are a few slides here that represent our current class sizes at the elementary, middle, and high school level. Generally, our class sizes are very healthy. I would say we're very competitive in this area, looking at other school districts that pride themselves on student and teacher and family connections. Having small class sizes enables that to occur. It allows our teachers to provide a higher level of attention to our kids and their families, and to provide an incredibly supportive environment that is the hallmark in many ways of our program here at Haldane. So I believe as we look at our current class sizes, there don't need to be any significant shifts in this to enable these conditions to continue to occur. There may be some shifts in where the grade levels are positioned, but we keep that separate from the budget process. So when you look at fourth grade, having two sections, obviously it's a smaller cohort of kids. We're looking at that third grade section now coming up. We may have to shift a class section from one grade level to another to support that cohort at fourth grade. You'll note now, though, that smaller cohort's going into fifth grade, which has 3 sections. So that might be an area that we look to. So we try to, again, keep that at the building level and manage at the building level. We're not going to be proposing any reductions to class size or to class sections, at the elementary school. The intention behind this is just to give you a sense of what our class sizes look like at each grade level. At the middle school, again, our class sizes are very healthy. Our courses really range at the middle school, especially with the increase or the introduction of electives. I pulled just English and math here as representations because all of our students take ELA, all of them take math. They do science and social studies as well, so it's reflective of the class sizes in those sections as well. And you can see, again, very healthy. At the 9th and 10th grade, looking to geography and global, some of our students have access to AP World as well. Our class sizes, again, very healthy levels. Looking at the range of our English courses, I'll just let you sit with this for a moment. You can see that our class sizes, again, are very consistent with where they've been in years past, as well as what they are at other grade levels. If you were to walk through our high school in particular, and again, the electives increase at the high school level, you will see some real fluctuations and ranges, but we're always trying to strike the balance of having a broad elective offerings for our high school students. We feel that's very important, especially as our students begin to develop special interests in particular areas of study. So we want to have a good elective program in place and yet balance that against the cost. So I think we do a very good job of that here at Haldane. Circling back to the professional and curriculum development lines, so you'll see our curriculum development writing line there. As I alluded to, we want our teachers and we want to provide a structure for our teachers to continually come together to examine the Haldane Essentials, also examine areas of of the New York State learning standards, any other applicable standards that we feel are important, and to begin to look at their plans for how they teach their respective content areas and where the essentials interweave and how it relates to other grade levels. We only have $12,000 budgeted for our teachers, to engage in curriculum writing. So that's an area that, as I indicated earlier, we'll look to increase in next year's budget development, which will enable us to provide more opportunities for our teachers to do so. Something that we also have to be mindful here is balancing what I would qualify as a shift in how we typically approach this work, or when we typically approach this work in the school year. Curriculum writing in not only Haldane, but in many districts occurs typically in the summer. It's a good time to have space from working with students directly, but I think we can see as the unique stress that COVID has brought on the school year, our assumption is that most teachers will want that space in the summer just to step back from their direct work on school-related items. I should say, our teachers, and especially a good teacher, is never stepping back from their work completely. I think we all understand that. So I just want to make sure I have to appropriately qualify this. But really leaning into curriculum development may not be something that our teachers are seeking out to do in early July. And we can understand that. So on an administrative level, we also have to look at alternate structures that we could potentially put in place through the school year next year by way of release time. While we have teachers here as part of the regular workday to engage in this level of work, that may require an increase on the substitute line, just anticipating that we would need some sort of coverage structure worked out. That's predicated, obviously, on having subs in place and not experiencing some of the staffing issues that districts have in our region looking ahead to next year. But we can also try to find a reasonable space with our teachers, too, where in lieu of looking at summer, providing opportunities after school hours throughout the school year for curriculum design and development, and just embedding this into our operations September through June, which is unique. It's not common, but I think the times elicit a bit of a different approach. So needless to say, we'll have to budget for the option regardless of what it is. You'll see that our staff development lines have stayed relatively stable. That might be another area under staff development. As I mentioned, K-5 literacy enhancements or improvements. I'm thinking more of a starting place is just making sure that our teachers are aligned with continued professional development in that particular area first, before making any significant program changes or shifts. So we're currently examining what professional learning opportunities exist, what have our teachers been accessing, and what types of professional learning opportunities would our staff continue to be interested in and also benefit from engaging in as it relates to enhancing literacy practices at the elementary level. We still show, just because we typically do a 4-year look back, the new tech network line. That was something that we discontinued in 1920. That will drop off after this year, but it's there as a point of reference. And you can see that we've continued to utilize BOCES professional development in each school year, some years more than others, and that is listed there as well. So generally, though, I would say that this is an area that over time we have decreased our funding in, and that's fine. Don't particularly have an issue with that, but I do see now, as we continue to evolve in our work, that this is an area that will increase our funding to next school year as we are on better footing as it relates to our coherence planning goals and also as it relates to COVID. I'm going to ask Ann just to speak to, we'll just step away from curriculum design and development, get into some executive budget proposal information, and then we'll circle back to some program component information for the board. So Ann will speak to the governor's proposal.
Okay, so the governor's executive proposal comes out in January, and then it's discussed at the state level until April 1st is when the final budget is due. Not everything that's in the executive proposal pertains to schools, so I've just taken out some some points that could affect us if they stay in the budget, and they're just interesting items. I thought that they were interesting as they pertain to school districts. The first item, which was surprising to me because it's the first time in many years that there's no formula aid changes proposed. So that distraction has been taken away, where usually we're focused on, oh, they can't take away our formula aids, and they're going to put them all in one pot, or they're going to call them something different, or they're going to cap them. And it really is a distraction because we get so focused on that we forget some of the other stuff that they're doing. And we don't really pay attention to that. So that's good this year. The breakfast and lunch program subsidy is under discussion to continue. I don't really have details on it yet, but they're going to shift a lot of that to the federal level to continue the free and reduced lunch for all. It's really something that's on the table. We've really benefited from it. Our revenue is up not only because of participation, but because of the reimbursement rate. So it would really be beneficial if they left that in. The pre-K to 12 Clean Green Schools Initiative. Those are supporting new projects for school building energy efficiency. It's grants through NYSERDA, so it's in conjunction with them. That encourages new projects to be energy efficient, not projects that we already have approved, but something that we may use going forward, since we do have the master plan that's under discussion. The universal pre-K aid continues. The support for zero emissions bus purchases and infrastructure. This would really have an impact on us if it stays in there. It's a very aggressive timeline. The infrastructure also includes charging stations, which it's very good that they're getting some aid on that, because they can be very expensive, especially since the proposal requires bus purchases to be zero emissions by 2027. So any buses that school districts will buy starting in 27 have to be zero emission. And then by 2035, all buses that are on the road are to be zero emission. So that is very aggressive. And with our fleet, we would, the district would start thinking about that earlier. Not sure that this is going to fly in this state that it's in, because it would be really expensive, even with additional aid. The last thing is something that they throw in the executive budget, I think, every year, is to eliminate any prior year adjustments. When there's any adjustments in state aid and the state owes us money, they pay us when they have the money. They owe, some of the adjustments are back to 2012. If we owe them, they take it from our next payment that they send to us. They just take it. We don't have to pay them. So this is about $55,000 that this would be worth to us. They're going to throw it back in there because it's just, this is one of those little distraction things, but it's not a whole lot of meaning to us, really. So these are the numbers for the executive budget run. The first line is foundation aid. I'm going to come back to that, and because I just want to summarize the rest of it. From BOCES aid down to transportation aid, those are the formula-based aid, and those are reimbursements for the expenditures from the year before. Those are the aids that I said that there would be no changes to formulas. And it's all just based on our usage and what we get going forward. We're pretty consistent with what we use, and since our rates haven't changed, those don't really change much. Building aid are approved completed projects that we get aid over, whether it's 15 or 30 years. What I want to point out in foundation aid, which has been flat for years because it was frozen, there was a settlement this past year with the state that over 3 years we're going to be made whole on our foundation aid. So that's good news for us, because if you pull out the total increase, let me just back up, from 21-22, which is the current year, to next year, that's an increase of $357,666. That includes formula aid. So if you pull out only the foundation, we're just under 300,000 increase, which we haven't seen in years. So that's good. And in 23-24, looking ahead, of course, they can always change their mind, but part of the settlement is that we'll have additional monies in 23-24 to foundation aid. So that's really huge. That's been many years that we've been waiting for. That goes back to the two-headed dragon, if you remember those presentations.
Is this the first year of the 3-year phase-in or the second year?
We're getting, the 21-22 is the first year. So we are getting some funds that were not in the budget prep for last year, because we just found out about that settlement a couple of months ago.
Okay.
So 21-22, we're going to see some revenue for foundation aid. And then in 22-23, it brings us up to the 50% level. And then in 23-24, we'll be fully funded.
Okay. And these are ongoing? These are ongoing, they're not like the federal aid that
Correct.
we had last year that
Foundation
were one
aid
time. Yep.
is your base aid.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a significant change.
It is significant. As far as the tax levy limit goes, right now, we are at 3.67% increase, requiring the simple majority. It's an estimate. If you see the little blurb at the bottom, I'm still awaiting some final components to the calculation. It's not going to impact the levy limit substantially. We're at the maximum 2% for the CPI increase because the cost of living was, as we know, pretty high in 2021 by the end. So that's an increase of $769,462, give or take a little there for the final. But again, that's going to add substantially to the revenue. So if there are any questions on those slides for the executive proposal, if not, I will.
Don't go anywhere, Ann. I just have a question. Maybe this is for Dr. Benante, but can you remind me of where we're at with the pre-K funding? So the universal pre-K, the pre-K funding was given to us this year, right? 21-22, but to my knowledge, we haven't accessed it yet because we weren't in a position to do so. Can you just talk a little bit? Is that money that we could have accessed this year but didn't, still available to us? And does it
Yes.
roll over? And how does
Yes,
that all
yes, and yes, I believe. So
Okay.
there was an allocation designated. We have to apply to use the allocation.
I see.
So we did receive through, or were notified last year through the budget development process at the state level that an allocation was set aside for Haldane. And that was new. That had not been the case. And we didn't have much of a heads up on that either. It just was in the final budget. As sometimes as the governor's executive proposal is worked on through the legislature, things appear. And UPK funding has been in place in previous years, but Haldane, along with many districts, were not eligible. It was really designated for high needs areas. So through this fall, we began to investigate the use of accessing that funding. We felt that there are a lot of particulars that need to be sorted through in order to have a viable pre-K program. There's several requirements that require quite a bit of time of planning. We are continuing to work on that planning behind the scenes to potentially access the funding for the upcoming school year. There's two options districts can take, just off the top of my head. We can choose to run a program internally, meaning we would open up a classroom and a space that would be designated for pre-K, at Haldane. Again, there's various requirements that you have to have that would require some cost expenditures on our end. We did not see that through over time and examining that as an option for us. There would be, one, just issues with space here, and identifying a space was difficult. Also, the infrastructure upgrades that would be necessary to make the state or the space consistent with regulations for pre-K would just be additional costs that would come on. So the second option is to contract with other pre-K providers and essentially working out an agreement with them to include students, Haldane students, as part of their program. And what's unique here is that our pre-K providers generally have pretty high demand. So they may be operating a private pre-K, for example, and already have 20 seats and a waiting list. So that doesn't necessarily create an opportunity for us. Also, the funding, and this is something we'll have to discuss with the board should we choose to access it, the funding that we receive for the state for pre-K is really should be considered, I would say, as startup funding. It's going to necessitate an additional investment from the district to really be worthwhile for a pre-K provider. We receive $6,500 per student. And some of the pre-K costs in our area range up to over $20,000. So if you're thinking about us now approaching a provider and saying, well, we have funding that we can commit to this, our state level funding is approximately $6,500 a student. So if they have the opportunity just to hold their seat for they're running a business and have someone pay in full at double or triple the cost, it's a tough sell to convince a private provider to hold a seat for us at $6,500. So we would have to, again, examine that and whether or not the district was willing and able to commit additional funding to supplement what the state would be providing us for a UPK. That's really the issue. We can negotiate a different rate with a provider. And some providers that they're open to that. I'm trying to balance that, and this is where we last left off with, well, where are those providers? Because the program does not have to exist in Phillipstown. We could contract with an agency in Beacon, or we can contract with an agency in Peekskill. And we have to be mindful of, okay, we may set that up, but would our families even be interested in that, in going to Beacon or going to Peekskill? So there's a lot to sort through, but the indication is the funding will still be there for up into next school year, so it's there for us to plan around. But it's a significant investment in time in planning for the district. But once you have it up and running, it's ideally that relationship is established. But I would be advocating, or if we were to do anything, it's looking at the second option as opposed to opening our own program right here. That I don't think is within reach for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Sean, do you have any questions over there for Ann?
Nope.
We're good?
So this is the full overview of our program component, expenditure trends and projections. We include in this salaries that are associated with teaching, and it's labeled regular school, our general education program side. Special services, again, is the cost associated with our special education salaries, teachers who are working in special education. Special schools is summer school, generally, or summer programs that we're offering. We really limited that last school year in light of COVID. I think that designation, it's not a misprint, it was for proctoring that was going on in the summertime. Instructional media, pupil services, which can be thought of as related service support, our transportation costs, and benefits are all listed here. So the program component comprises the bulk of our budget. If you think of our budget arriving somewhere around $25 million, these costs are staffing costs generally, which is the core of what we do, is about $18 million. So I was speaking earlier to curriculum design and development and the importance of that. It shouldn't overshadow the importance of the funding that goes into putting good people in front of our kids each day, and that's all associated here. I'll pause just if there's any questions. So you may see some shifts in this area, just to close. If we're looking at adding staff in any way, this is where it would appear in our budget development. And I'll be mindful of pointing to that in future presentations if that's something that we're doing. So Anne's alluding to some of the revenue lines. She mentioned the tax levy limit as well as our foundation aid. So we're continuing to look at those anticipated revenues for us, costs for our taxpayers on one end, against our anticipated expenditures. And we're really at the point where we're sitting with some of these program ideas. What cost will they be to the district, and then how will that fit into the budget development process and the administration's recommendation in March? Our building and department leaders have finalized or are very close to finalizing their anticipated budget needs for the upcoming year. And the administration, again, as I mentioned, I think several times already, we are preparing to present our recommended budget to the board on March 1st.
Very good. It's nice to have a positive outlook.
Bit of a different,
Budget.
different tone, I would say, or
Very
vibe
different
from previous
tone.
years, at least in the few years I've been here, which is good.
Yeah.
Ann said it was going to be good, her final year. She was going to take care of it, so. She's holding true to her word.
Good year to go out on.
Thank you.
Good year to go out on, yes, exactly. All right, thank you. More to come. Communication from the public. Anybody have anything to share? Okay, information reports are here for review. Going into consent agenda minutes, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
May I have a second, please? These are our January 18th workshop meeting minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, unfinished business. Our Board of Education mid-year self-evaluation. I'll turn it to John to talk us through this.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I know this comes at what always seems like a weird time of year after we've gotten done the superintendent's evaluation and we're starting up budget and it's mid-year but anyways, we got some good feedback from everybody, which is great. All the board members should have a copy of the full debrief in your inbox. And as I said in my email, and I'll say to the public now, I'm not going to read through everything because I don't think that's worth time. But I think that it would be useful to highlight what I thought were sort of the key themes that I saw. But I encourage everybody to take a deep dive into what was the complete what was said. So what in reflecting on the comments that I received from everybody, I think we did it as for the public's information. We use the same rubric as we use for the superintendents. There are 5 standards. Each standard has 5 practices. At the year end, we would judge ourselves and evaluate ourselves on every practice for every standard. In the mid-year, we ask for directional, and Jen and I think probably the 4th grade cohort uses glows and grows, which I think is a good way to think about it. Things that we're doing well and we like, and things that we feel like we could do better with a growth mindset. And so in general, I found that there was some pretty good consistency around 2 areas. For glows, I think, I'm going to take my glasses off because I'm at that age. Board engagement on monitoring district and I wouldn't say aggressive, but thoughtful and intelligent questioning in public session and in executive session when it's appropriate and when there are things that need to be discussed in executive session. So understanding what's going on in the district and keeping a sharp eye on trying to understand why decisions are made, how we can make a better impact, and what we're doing as a district. So really weighing in on getting a sense of how the district is faring and how we're performing. And the second glow area, I would say just generally board management. The fact that we do a self-evaluation, it feels kind of like a meta response. We're scoring ourselves well on the self-evaluation for having done a self-evaluation, but it's a useful step. It's nice. We'll take the win, but it is thoughtful and a useful process. The retreats that we conduct regularly that allow us space with subject matter experts, other districts around particular topics, where we really need to have an open discussion about how do we want to approach this. And that is very useful, certainly for us as board members to grow and understand what's going on. And then our overall approach to governance, how we run meetings, how we govern ourselves, how we act as one board. Even though we may have differences of opinions or approaches on what we want to do, we act in a unified way, which is a good governing theme. So that was GLOW side. I would point out that the collective board members gave many more GROWs than they did GLOWs. So I don't know whether that's indicative of how we approach life just in general, but perhaps a good way to do it. But I would say that by and large, the entire, maybe not the entirety, but the vast majority of the constructive feedback was on communication in a number of different areas. Around the annual budget, it was pointed out that we do a very good job of trying to engage the community, especially around the annual budget, especially when there's challenging years. And we've had a number of challenging years previously. We do a lot of outreach. We do a lot of engagement with particular constituent groups and supporting groups. Is there a way that we can do a better job of that more consistently? So there's transparency. And certainly, even after being on the board for a number of years, I feel like every year I have to remind myself of the difference between foundation and formula aid and why that makes a difference. And the difference of what the TRS contribution and the fact that that is out of our hands and there's a year-over-year change. So that's information that should be transparent, and we should do, what can we do to make that more transparent and more accepting to the community? Second, around the sort of the shared vision and mission of the institution, I think we've done a great job, the district and the board, in establishing the strategic coherence plan, but how do we continue to support and communicate that? What does that mean? What does that mean for us, for the district, for what we're doing as a board, how we're supporting the district in financial or policy decisions? And finally, really on public engagement, and some of this conversation just happened very recently, but some continues to happen. We've had these conversations a number of times, certainly when I've been on the board. How do we think about engagement, especially in a virtual world, especially in a world where the default communication from parents and students, parents in general, community members, is via email rather than via written communication? How do we think about that? How do we respond? How do we make that response transparent? How do we welcome people to our meetings and make that communication engaging, even though it is a board meeting at which the public is invited to attend and listen? So those are my top level. I would encourage anybody to weigh in. I know that's in your inbox as of this evening, so you may not have a chance to deep dive, but my suggestion coming out of this would be that we celebrate our GLOWs, and we take some chance to think about the communication as a perennial topic for discussion, and how can we do a better job of it? And I think there's some things that we should really try to dig into in that one.
Yeah, it sounds like that might be a good retreat topic. Not sure when that happens. Maybe it's going into the next year,
Yep.
or as we set board goals for the year or something. But it sounds like just communication in general, and diving into some of those questions we have, and moments of pause that we have. We might be able to dig deep in some sort of retreat fashion. Thanks for putting this together, John. I'm looking forward to reading everybody's comments.
Absolutely.
And we also talked about looking at the evaluation tool,
Yes.
and so I think now
Yep.
that we've gone through the evaluation tool, it's kind of fresh in our minds as, the items that make sense. I want to evaluate myself on those things, and the items that don't feel like they really pertain to us, or things that we're missing that we'd like to have in there. Because this evaluation tool, it's for us, so we can modify it any way we want to. So it might be nice to find a way to fit that in before we do
Yes.
the final evaluation at the end of the year.
So I'd be happy to, in the interest of giving people something to react to, which always seems to be a good way to sort of trigger a conversation, now that we've gone through the mid-year, is to go through the evaluation tool and just make some suggestions. If they're totally personal, nothing, no past input or anything, to say, if we were to modify and change the self-evaluation tool, this is where I would think that maybe we don't need to evaluate ourselves on this particular practice, and maybe something that, happy to do that, and we can start a communication within the board. And maybe we share that at the next, at a board meeting upcoming for discussion.
Do you want to send, so maybe that, if you want to send like an email
Yeah,
prompt,
absolutely.
just, and so we can reflect on our reflecting?
Sure, sure.
Maggie or Sean, did you guys have any other initial comments? I know we haven't gotten a chance to read everybody else's yet. Okay. So I think we're on to a good start. Thank you for organizing that,
Yep.
John. Okay. So we're going into policy review. This is our third reading and possible adoption of the age of entrance policy. So I'll turn it to Ms. Platt.
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby adopts the following Haldane Central School District policy. Policy 7120, age of entrance.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. So this is the age of entrance policy that we've been talking about. We've kind of extended the time with this in case public wanted to comment or had more questions. I haven't seen any comments coming to the board. I don't know if you've gotten anything.
Other than the one that was
Yep.
mentioned at the last meeting, there haven't been any further comments.
Okay, so it seems like I'm comfortable at least moving forward with it. Does anybody have any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. CSE, CPSE recommendations, Ms. Platt?
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendation of the Committee on Preschool Special Education and Committee on Special Education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay,
Just,
go ahead.
no. Finish, and then I have a question.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, good.
I just thought of this because I know that we don't see the individuals, obviously. And frankly, because of that, I admit I never look at the document because it's just numbers. So we're approving a recommendation. My question was going to be, and I was wondering if this might be something that Ms. Rounds could speak to at the next information report, is, and I realize we have small class numbers, so our N is small, but are we seeing changes in the number of students that are entering Haldane with a CSE, CPSE recommendation over time?
Got it.
Cool, thank you.
We have our special education update next meeting too, so
Fantastic.
maybe Ms. Rounds could include that at some point too. Okay, our agreement with the HFA.
Whereas on January 13th, 2022, representatives of the Board of Education and the Haldane Faculty Association reached agreement on a memorandum of agreement to create a 3-year successor collectively negotiated agreement effective July 1st, 2021, and terminating on June 30th, 2024. And whereas Board of Education ratification is a requirement of said memorandum of agreement, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby ratifies the January 13th, 2022 Memorandum of Agreement and hereby appropriates those monies necessary to fund the 2021 through 2024 agreement between the district and the Haldane Faculty Association.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? I will thank John Headland and Sean McNall for being our board representatives at these negotiations. I know it's a heavy lift, and thank you for your time. And certainly thank Dr. Benante and Dinio and our legal representation and the entire HFA leadership team. It was a journey, but it's so great to be here. I think it's a real positive way to start the new year. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Is there any communication from the public? All right. Any board reflections? Dr. Benante, any final thoughts?
No final thoughts, Jen? Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. May I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Very good.
Good to see you.